So as many of you know, today is a special day. It's the triumphal entry of the victorious UConn women's basketball team to the state capitol. And in celebration of the defeat of South Carolina, the victors will march through the city of Hartford with streets lined with cheering supporters until the end of the parade route, where there will be a rally celebrating the victors. And the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Arch that the parade route goes through, that was erected in honor of those who served in the Civil War. So you could say we're carrying on a great Connecticut tradition of celebrating the defeat of South Carolina. So if we had a time-traveling visitor from ancient Rome and brought them to Hartford this afternoon, they'd likely recognize what was going on as a victory parade, because we've been doing victory parades like this for a very long time. Though they'd be used to the victors riding horses rather than motor vehicles. And additionally, in the past, victors would have been a winning Roman general or an emperor and his army rather than a sports team. And also typically the victor would be marching through the conquered city to the temple for the city's patron god, and the victor would then offer a sacrifice to that god. Now, sometimes there'd also be a parade celebrating the conquering heroes back in Rome, and that would follow a similar game plan. So if the Huskies were to completely follow the Roman plan, they'd have to keep marching around Bushnell Park and go into Center Congregational Church there. And then I imagine they'd just have to leave a large donation, because our denomination doesn't really do animal sacrifice anymore. But in our polity, I suppose that would be up to the local church to decide. So in addition to being the day of the UConn Victory Parade, it is also Palm Sunday, the day the church commemorates Jesus' triumphal entry into the city of Jerusalem ahead of his crucifixion and arrest. And we call this part of Scripture the triumphal entry because Jesus enters Jerusalem like a victorious general would. The streets are lined with people cheering. They shout, "Blessed is the King." And if we keep reading, Jesus actually does keep marching all the way to the temple in Jerusalem. So it's no wonder that the authorities in Jerusalem took note of Jesus and started worrying about him as a threat to the peace. Jesus enters Jerusalem like a conquering hero with people calling him king. That would have felt very political. Like if you're the people in charge of Jerusalem, the last thing you're going to want is crowds shouting, "Someone is king." And this is all happening in the days leading up to the Passover. So the city is packed with pilgrims there for the festival. And on top of that, Passover is the holiday commemorating the Israelites getting freed from slavery in the oppressive Egyptian empire. So even without Jesus entering Jerusalem, every Passover is basically designed in a lab to be all the things the local Roman authorities would have hated. Nothing like trying to keep order in your conquered territory as the people celebrate a festival about being set free. However, there are some key ways that Jesus deviates from this standard conquering Roman general playbook. The most notable difference is instead of entering Jerusalem on a war horse or a chariot, Jesus rides in on a humble donkey. He also, quite importantly, has not actually conquered the city by force. And when he gets into the city, instead of celebrating, he weeps and laments. Instead of offering sacrifice in the temple, Jesus will drive the money changers out of the temple. Whatever sort of king Jesus is, whatever sort of kingdom he's bringing, it's definitely not the same as what the Romans have going on. Now, the part of the lesson I'm most drawn to this year is Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, which only happens in Luke. But before I get to that, I do want to point out some fun facts about the gospel according to Luke's version of Palm Sunday. So the first thing to note about Luke's version of the Palm Sunday story is that there are no palms. We only have people laying their cloaks down ahead of Jesus. So if Luke were the only gospel we had, we'd be celebrating today as Cloak Sunday. And while the other gospel writers have people shouting Hosanna, Luke doesn't have that either. But then there's the donkey acquisition. So the other gospels do have Jesus sending the disciples out to get a donkey as well. And in the other gospels, Jesus instructs the disciples to be like, if anyone's like, "Hey, why are you stealing my donkey?" The disciples are supposed to reply, "The Lord needs it and will return it immediately." But in Luke, the disciples are sent out to go get the donkey, and when they're asked, like, "Hey, why are you stealing my donkey?" they're supposed to respond, "The Lord needs it." And then there's no information about returning the donkey. So one commentary called this a heist. Now, what does it mean that we have what appears to be Grand Theft Donkey? I don't know. That's why I'm preaching on what happens after that. Some people speculate that it's a sign Jesus has arranged things ahead of time, or that people would have interpreted the Lord needs it as like the Romans have requisitioned it. Unclear. So maybe Jesus returns the donkey after and Luke didn't write it down. We don't know. So anyway, Jesus gets to Jerusalem, and then he weeps over the city and laments, "If you, even you, had only recognized this day on the things that make for peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes. Indeed, the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up ramparts around you and surround you and hem you in on every side, and they will crush you to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave within you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation from God." Now, on one level, this is predicting the destruction of Jerusalem that's going to occur in year 70 when the Jewish people rebel against the Romans. And as you might expect, the Romans won. And in retaliation, Jerusalem is destroyed along with its temple. But this lament also plays into the name of Jerusalem, which essentially translates to city of peace. Psalm 122 says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Peace be within your walls, security within your towers. For the sake of my relatives and friends, I will say, peace be within you." But from the city's establishment to the present day, peace is often hard to come by in Jerusalem. It's one of the great tragedies of history that such a holy place should be the site of so much death and destruction. Now, some of this bloody history has to do with simple geography. In ancient times, the great powers near Israel were Egypt and then whatever was going on in Mesopotamia, so think the Persians, Assyrians, or Babylonians. And if you wanted to get from Egypt to Babylon, or vice versa, the best route is directly through Israel. And Israel survived as an independent state through strategic alliances and paying tribute, but it became much more efficient for the great empires to simply just conquer Israel, which is what eventually happens. But if we fast forward, Jerusalem and Israel are then fought over because they contain holy sites for Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. We're on so many centuries of hurts, revenge, atrocities, and persecutions in the Holy Land that it feels like there will never be peace, especially with all the bloodshed and war in recent years. Jerusalem, the city of peace, is an example of how we as humanity have not recognized the things that make for peace. Our own country, the modern state of Israel, Hamas, all of us have not recognized or not chosen the things that make for peace in the Holy Land. No one's hands are clean. It's a shame and a tragedy. Now, what I'm going to say next is going to seem like a completely different topic, but I'm going to come back around, so just bear with me. So the Imperial War Museum in London has a fantastic YouTube channel. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, I'd love a multi-hour documentary on the Falklands War, or what I'm really looking for is a short documentary on the Battle of Britain where they also show me all the planes, or I wish someone would produce a documentary on why the Gallipoli campaign during World War I was a failure, and it includes also getting to look at all the materials used during the campaign. So if any of those things were exciting to you, the Imperial War Museum in London's YouTube channel is specifically for you. Now, in 2023, that marked the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which ended the Troubles, the conflict in Northern Ireland between the Republicans and the Unionists, or the Catholics and the Protestants. And for the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, the Imperial War Museum produced a number of short documentaries for YouTube about the Troubles, including one solely dedicated to the negotiations around the Good Friday Agreement. And it's a good look at one point where people did manage to recognize the things that make for peace. And also, at the same period, The Economist also released a documentary about the state of things going on in Northern Ireland, and that one's also good. So in negotiating the Good Friday Agreement, every single stage of it was terribly fraught. A ceasefire was started and stopped and restarted. Attacks took place during negotiations. Parties left and rejoined multiple times. Everything was just a breath away from falling completely apart. And many of the hardest decisions were kicked down the road into the future, and everyone ended up giving up a lot. But what allowed the negotiations to succeed is everyone wanted peace more than they'd wanted war. Everyone had seen so much of war that peace, even a very imperfect one, was worth it. Now, this fragile peace has been strained and at risk in recent years as Britain extracted itself from the European Union, and this directly threatens the free movement of people between Northern Ireland and the rest of Ireland, or Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom, and this free movement was a key aspect of the peace agreement. So there's been increased radicalization of young people who weren't alive during the worst of the Troubles to know how bad things could be. And even today, over 90% of school children attend schools segregated by religion. And literal walls still separate many Catholic and Protestant neighbors from each other. They're called peace walls. And many of the victims of sectarian violence have to cope with the pain of the people who killed their family members walking free as part of the peace agreement. And on top of that, the Northern Irish parliamentary government perpetually falls apart as it becomes deadlocked between Unionists and Republicans. So it's a very imperfect peace. But countless people are at work to try to help keep the peace so that Northern Ireland can build a future. And there are a number of groups that are working to prevent sectarian violence and build up community across religious lines. And one program is called Peace Players. And it's a religiously integrated basketball program that also includes training on leadership development and conflict resolution. And this program and others like it are the only time Catholic and Protestant kids interact with each other or have the opportunity to become friends. And the hope of programs like this is that they help kids realize that they're in a world of potential neighbors rather than enemies. It's an opportunity for kids to learn to love their neighbors, even the ones that are different from themselves. And it's a chance to recognize what makes for peace. And peace takes active work. The tragedy at the heart of the gospel and the heart of human history is that we often don't do the work or recognize what makes for peace. It's a tragedy that continuously unfolds in our world and all the places where people are dying today, like Ukraine and Gaza. It's a tragedy that's unfolding continuously in our own country as we still deal with hate crimes, discrimination, and a cavernous political divide where we often see our neighbors as enemies. But the good news of the gospel, despite the tragedy, is that God clearly knew and knows us and came here anyway. Jesus in this lesson is weeping. He's heartbroken rather than angry. This is a parent heartbroken that their children just keep doing the wrong thing. We have a God whose heart breaks at the brokenness in the world, and he came to share our common lot anyway. That means we've got a God who loves us, flaws and all. It means we've got a God who came to save actual, real, live people. Our God is in the Savior business. As we begin Holy Week, we walk with Christ as he experiences some of the worst aspects of what human beings are capable of doing to each other. It's a week for us to remember the times we wished for war rather than peace, and prepared a cross rather than a welcome. But Holy Week finishes with the joy of Easter and the living proof that no cross we build and no death we deal can stop our God from reaching out to us and working in the world to guide our feet in the way of peace.